On the 10th day of infant Christmas, an infant gave to me a rebirthed episode from 2018 called An Ayahuasca Story. All right, this is episode 776, Reflections, An Ayahuasca Story. And this is a conversation between myself, psychologist Rachel Harris, and brain researcher Michael Ferguson that we recorded way back in February 2018, about 4 days after I had returned from my very first ayahuasca ceremony. Now, this is the first time that I've shared this recording publicly. I did release it last year on Patreon as the third installment in a 7-part series that I jokingly titled Pearls Before Swine. But as I'm kicking off this Reflections series in January 2022, I thought it would be fitting to share this significant experience that has impacted my life and this podcast in ways that I expect will become quite clear to you as you listen. So, with no further ado, hang on to your hats and glasses, because this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness. All right, welcome back to part 3 of the Pearls Before Swine. I still chuckle every time I think that. I don't really think you're swine, but I do really think that these are pearls. So, how about this? So, at the end of the last one, I kind of teased you by saying I had this recording from February 2018, but then I couldn't find it. But guess what? I did. And that's what you're going to hear today. So let me set the stage for you. So there's a woman named Rachel Harris. She's a psychiatrist. Is that what she is? I don't know. I could probably look it up. She wrote a book called Listening to Ayahuasca, and she's participated in dozens, if not more, if not hundreds, I don't know if it's been hundreds, of ayahuasca ceremonies and interviewed people. And around this time, February 2018, I was working with Michael Ferguson on a podcast that we were doing together called the Luminous Brain Podcast. And we set up this interview so that Michael could interview Rachel about ayahuasca ceremonies. And maybe I'll play that one for you as well. Maybe I'll share that one with you because it's no longer available. The Luminous Brain podcast was a short-lived project that we were both working on, and I don't think it's available anywhere. But it's an interesting interview. You'll probably be interested in it. So maybe that'll be part 4. But after that interview between Michael and Rachel, we kept her on and shared with her my very, very recent experience. I mean, it'd probably been days. I think it was 2 days that I'd been back from this experience, and I explained to her a lot of what you heard in parts 1 and part 2. So you get to hear her response, you get to hear Michael's response. He talks about the brain a lot, and I think this is going to be really interesting for you. So I'm glad I was able to find this sharing with you, my patron supporters of Infants on Thrones, and I hope you enjoy. One of you start.
Well, I could start because I was in my original research, when I was gathering data through a questionnaire and also interviews, I was looking for therapists who were working with people who were in ceremony a few times a year or regularly. And I really did not find many people. And finally, I found this one woman who was a really experienced therapist and working with people in ceremonies regularly. And she pretty quickly said to me, "You're asking the wrong question." I was asking, how is therapy different when the client is drinking ayahuasca? She said, "You're asking the wrong question. You should be asking, how is the therapeutic process different when the therapist is connected to the plant, to ayahuasca, and the client is also."
Oh, interesting.
And that changes the whole energetic dynamic of the therapeutic relationship. And she's right. That was the key question.
And how does that?
So we have that situation here.
Okay. True. Yeah. Okay.
Where I would just love to hear about your experience.
Okay. So I did 2 nights, and this might be very common from what you've heard. It's common from friends of mine that introduced me to it. But after the first night, I wasn't going to do the second night. I kind of decided, it was all right. It was okay. It was quite underwhelming. There was a lot of fear in it for me. And so the first night it was an effort just to get to this place to do the ceremony. And I'm not a person that's really comfortable in groups of other people. I like my space and my isolation. So knowing that I was going to be around about 20 people who I hadn't met before in a very vulnerable situation for an extended period of time, was really challenging for me. So I felt, I was kind of telling myself, good for you. You broke through that. That's good enough. And you,
right, let's go.
And you sat and you took a small dose, so the way that it started, we were all dressed in white and went into a studio in this place, sitting around in circles. Do you have a question, Michael?
Yeah. How much do you want like peanut gallery commentary as you're going along?
As much as you want to give.
Okay.
But follow your inner you.
Because I'm already like getting like kind of like.
Yeah, there were no green aprons.
Okay.
Yeah. just dressed in white, no green aprons. But it was very. My background is folklore. I studied folklore, and ritual was part of that. And so I understand the technical aspects of different rituals from around the world. So I'm witnessing this, understanding it, going, okay, I'm going to have this experience. We're sitting around in a circle, and the shaman starts and just gives some words of welcome. And there were a few that were having their first experience. Many were returned. And so here's what to expect. And then it's important to carry an intention with you. What is your intention? And so we went around the circle and shared what it was that we were hoping to get out of the experience. And then we all, kind of moved back to our mats and blankets and pillows that we had ready. He had us come up individually to him to give us the medicine, and he would ask us, do you want to have a small dose, a medium dose, or a large dose? And there were actually two different strands, or two different versions. There was a Brazilian medicine, and there was a Hawaiian medicine. And so we got to choose between the two and the dose. And his advice was just listen to whatever you hear inside and be true to that. And so I chose Hawaiian, small. And took it, went back to my spot, waited for everybody to get that. There was you mentioned in the interview with Michael that shamans will do things to ward off negative, malevolent, evil spirit. So there was a prayer, a poem read, invocation. There was an altar in the middle with mementos that people had brought. And so we said that prayer together, and then everybody drank. And then the music started, and it was recorded music. It wasn't live music. And it was just beautiful. And
what kind of music was it?
The first song was a song that. So this shaman is quite a collector of music. He's kind of a connoisseur, and he puts the playlist together, intuitively. And this first song, I don't know how to describe. It was popular music, and it was a song that I recognized a version of it from the movie Hocus Pocus, because my children used to sing it. It's like, "Come, little children, come with me into the world of magic," something like that. But it was very comforting to me, because it made me think of my kids, and that, okay, we're having this magical experience together as a group. And the first, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 songs were very calm, soothing, lovely, harmonious, melodic music. About 20 or so minutes in, when I started feeling the effects coming on, which were just like very warm, I started getting very concerned about the purge, and turned to there was a few helpers in the room, And the helper next to me, I asked her if I should be concerned that I hadn't purged yet. And she's like, don't be concerned about anything. Just let things happen, let it go. And I couldn't do that. I was just like really uptight and concerned the entire time. Once I started feeling the effects come on, the tone, the type of music changed, and it was more of like a jungle atmosphere, jungle sounds, tribal chanting, things that were very unfamiliar to me. And actually, also having been raised, as Michael said, as a Mormon, these are like, okay, this is evil. This is devil stuff. This is voodoo. I started, like, those old memories of stuff were kind of popping up, and like, okay, no, push that back. But there was still, it kind of fueled the fear a little bit. And as I closed my eyes and I was just picturing and thinking, and I started feeling myself kind of being like moving up to the veil as they talked about it, I would open up my eyes and force myself back. And just like, so I had this very mild experience where I was just kind of like gently in it, having some insights. But I started thinking, boy, we are being brainwashed right now, aren't we? This is, a very vulnerable state. And, the shaman is, there are messages obviously in the music that we're receiving. There's things that he's telling us that we're receiving. I'm like,
what is he saying?
Oh, boy, I can't really think right now, but just about how important it is to trust your inner self, to love. Yeah, he's talking. Yeah, and it's a very thoughtful approach, and much of what he said, I felt even before taking the medicine. Much of what he said, I felt resonated very deeply with me. So in that circle before we took the medicine, he talked about how there are different groups. Some are more traditional than others. And what's most important to him is to avoid dogma and to allow people to have whatever experience they're going to have be an authentic experience. And, when you're sharing your insights with people, they're your insights. You're not trying to change somebody else. Let them have.
And this was all at night. It was at night in the dark.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we took the medicine probably about 9 p.m.
Okay.
And then each hour there would be a call. Anybody who feels called to take other medicine, more medicine can come up. And there were some medicines besides ayahuasca as well. There was something called rape. Have you come across rape?
Yes.
Okay. And one called sananga.
I've heard of that. I don't know what that is.
It's eye drops.
Yeah.
And they both frightened me quite a bit.
Good.
So I decided not to do either of those. I didn't go up for seconds. I got to a point where I was uncomfortable enough with it that I'm like, okay, I came here, I experienced it, I'm ready for it to be done, and I'm just going to sit and wait this out. And that wasn't pleasant. That wasn't enjoyable. When the ceremony was over, or when the evening was over, so it probably ended at about 2 or 3 in the morning, we got back into the circle and shared again with the group any insights that we might have. People weren't required to, but if they felt like they wanted to. Then we went and had some soup and went to sleep.
So go ahead and tell us about your experience the second night. Not so much structure, but your experience.
So I made the decision the second night that I actually was going to break through my fear. And when it came time to approach the shaman, I asked him to provide me what he felt I should have. And I didn't even want to know what it was. And I would just receive it with gratitude.
That's a big leap.
Yeah. And so I said, I'll just receive it with gratitude. And
do you think, Rachel, do you think that leap is instrumental? That act of trusting?
It's very important. And yes, for that as well. And I imagine you got a bigger dose. And also the doses are cumulative. So
interesting. Yeah.
From a small dose, it's still in your system. So the second night, you're already in it, sort of.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it is. The relationship with the shaman, the trust in the shaman it is really part of the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I ended up also going up for the second time when he said, if anybody's called to, and I did the same thing again. I said, you provide it to me, and took it. I had read, I'd started reading your book and switched over to one that, it just came out in January. Richard Haidt, I think, something about taking the psychedelic leap. And he talked about his experience with ayahuasca and psilocybin and some other things. And they were horrifying experiences, horrifying visions that he had. And I had talked with a woman who I just met. It was one of those kind of synchronicity things where you just meet them and then find out she had just done ayahuasca. And so I'm like, well, let's get lunch together. And she told me her experience where she had taken the medicine and just got overwhelmed by it, passed out, and woke up in her own, vomit. And so I had all of these images, the first night especially, that were just terrifying me. So the second night I just did that trust. I went through, I didn't have anything like that. As soon as we started, and also the second night, the ceremony started with rape, which you said you're familiar with, but you don't have experience with?
Exactly.
Okay. So my understanding of it is it's a tree bark or something like that. And it's applied through the nostril. There's like a little horn or something. You choose whether it goes into the right or the left nostril, and he just blows on it very gently. He said it's going to sting a little bit like wasabi, but it's got healing properties. It's a traditional medicine.
Okay, I'm not smart enough to know how to access the internet. Would one of you look this up? It's RAPE.
Yeah.
What is it actually? I think it's Toei, but I want to be sure.
Okay,
yeah, I'll look that up.
Okay, thanks, Michael. And once again, at first I was not going to do that, but everybody else in the group was doing it, and I was off to the side. And I thought, I stayed here the second night because I want to be part of this group. I want to have the experience that I came here for. I want the healing that I came here to feel, and I want to face my fears. So I moved into the circle, and I did it, and immediately realized that my fears were way bigger than the actual experience of it, and that the feeling that it generated was just such warmth, and the trust that was there from the people that I was with that were, patting me on the back, a hand on the knee, like good for you being up here. We're glad to have you here. It was just all really.
That's very powerful.
Yeah, very, very powerful. And
Michael, what does it translate to?
So it says production of rape. It says, in addition to tobacco, a blend of rape is composed of tree ashes, aromatic or medicinal plants, or the ashes of them. The tobacco, and that's like talking about the preparation. So I'm still not finding the active component per se.
So it's probably nicotine.
Okay.
It's a traditional. It's slightly different than what we think of as nicotine, but it's tobacco.
Okay, yeah, and I do remember now as you're saying that was explained. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And just like a very little amount, but so I started as this ceremony started with the music. Again, I started feeling, at this point I was already feeling good because we had done the rape before. So I was already kind of having that really strong emotional connection. And the second night, people started singing along to the songs, and I joined my voice to their voice, even if I didn't know the words, just singing. Right. And the feeling of like the vibration of my voice and their voice together was so unifying and comforting. It was like being in that rape, circle when people were touching me. It was very comforting, and I enjoyed that. And anytime there was any kind of fear that I felt creeping in, I would ask a grandmother to push it away for me.
And did she?
Yes. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And also anytime I felt myself going into like, I want to ruminate on the past, like if I would think, oh, I want to see some of these childhood experiences, I would pull myself out of that and say, no, actually, I want to know what my purpose is. I want to know what I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like Eckhart Tolle, power of now, not living in the past, not ruminating on the future. Just, I want to be in this moment and know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about love to me. And it was that, and it's still very powerful that I have so much love that I want to express. And some of it I have, but I've been held down by fears and insecurities and all kinds of these things that the group talked about as shadow. And that I was letting my shadow be the author of my life instead of me, like my inner self, being the author of my life. And so I pictured myself as like an X-Men superhero that was just shooting love out of my chest. And I just wanted to fill the room with
You were a Care Bear, Glenn.
I was a Care Bear. You're right. And actually, the woman sitting next to me, who is a psychic, told me that my totem is a bear. So I'll be I'll be a Care Bear. I'll take it. So it was just very warm, intense feelings of happiness and love and, tears, gratitude, just so much gratitude, and feeling like I had reclaimed myself, that who I was when I was younger and I was religious and I would have these very powerful religious experiences and expressions and feel it, that I had pushed that down, and that had been pushed down for a long time. And whatever was holding that down, I felt it was gone. And not necessarily that it's going to be gone forever, but that it was gone for those moments. And I was just really grateful for that. And I was waiting. I was like, okay, this time if I'm coming up to the veil, I'm not going to push back on it. I'll just go. And that never happened. I never got pulled into anything or ripped away or saw anything or experienced anything at all that would be frightening or tearing. And I just started having all of these insights about what I should do for podcast episodes and, people that I should talk to, and, having Michael and this shaman get together so that Michael can do fMRI readings on a pre-ceremony and a post-ceremony and see what the difference is afterwards in your brain. And, things like this that I was thinking about. And I had this thought, I've never had visions or anything like that. And as I was thinking I've never had that, I started to see one. And it was, a closed-eyed, it wasn't like the big panoramic thing that I had already, expected or anticipated. It was very small. It was almost like looking through a microscope that I even had to like focus to get it in to actually see what it was. And one of the things that I saw were just like kind of squiggly lines that looked like a documentary that I recently saw on string theory, which may be exactly why I was seeing that. And that each one of these things got compacted into a smaller like octagon thing, all of these strings, and that's a soul. That's a soul. And that some other, I saw later a bunch of like little teeny tiny faces that were kind of like scrolling in and out, and asking the question, oh, are these faces that I wore in other lives? And the answer, yeah, not other lives, because it's only one life. You're only living one life. These are different incarnations of that one life. Mm-hmm. And then I asked the question, well, why am I seeing this? Because I want to focus on now and not get sucked into the past. Is this shadow trying to distract me again? And the response was, no, you've been really hard on your parents, your church leaders, people around you for the way that you were raised and the trauma that you had in your life. But we're showing you this so that you know that the trauma that you have in this life comes from other incarnations as well. It's this karmic trauma. So you can lighten up on these people around you because they've got their own trauma as well. And what you're doing right now is clearing that up. You're clearing it up for everyone that you've been. Later, a single face came up, and it was this very exquisitely beautiful Hindi woman. And I thought, oh, is this one of my incarnations as well? And they said, yeah, I'm a very important one to you. And I still get choked up when I'm thinking about this. And I like just intuited her life story, that she had been born in a privileged class, but had reached out of her class, out of her community to provide service to others, and made big changes in the lives of people around her, and was just loved and respected. But she suffered real tragedy in her life. Her 3 young children were killed as a result of a betrayal by one of her closest friends, and it filled her with such grief and anger that she was never really able to recover from that. And she still continued to serve as she had before, but it was empty service. She didn't feel the joy. She didn't feel the love and respect that they had for her. And she didn't feel that inner joy and love that had driven her to provide that in the first place. It was dead inside, and she died never being able to experience that. And one of the things that I've really, it's been really important to me, and Michael, it played an important role in this when we were in New York together last November, talking about the importance of having both the feminine and the masculine qualities of the mind complete and whole to be healthy. And so one of the things I've wanted is to have like a strengthened maternal feminine piece of me. And the response that came is, she is that for you. She is you, and she's that person for you. And you're giving her in kind of like some type of resurrection experience. She will be experiencing the joy that you experience. And so what she didn't have in her life, you're going to be able to give her and heal that and make that whole. And that was incredibly powerful. And there, I had my phone nearby. We didn't have any cell reception or Wi-Fi, so I was just using it to take notes, and that was driving the shaman nuts. So next time I do it, I'll do a pen and paper. Right. He did not like me being on that phone.
Why do you wait? Why do you say no, Rachel? Because you also seem very adamant that that's not ideal.
Well, I would imagine the phone lights up for you to do that. Yeah. It's making a small noise. Everyone's hearing is very sensitized. It would bother other people.
Got it.
And also take you out of the experience. These are very powerful experiences you're reporting.
Yeah. No, it was, and he actually sent my friend, who is like training. He's kind of apprenticing with this shaman over, because he thought that I had needed more medicine. He thought that I wasn't really in the experience. And I'm like, oh no, I'm way in the experience.
Right. No, you're
way in the experience.
Yeah.
And I started, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it's lovely. This second night is really your first real experience.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how you're already reporting a dialogue, a communication, receiving help with the spirit of Ayahuasca grandmother. Yeah. And also you've got I don't know if this is the first time, but you've got a whole new cosmology here with past lives, and it's one life and it's different manifestations, and we can heal from one life to another. This is not a Western belief system. Yeah. So now you're already in another world.
Right. Yeah. That's true. And it's, so the skeptic in me says, well, of course, because I have been leaning in this direction for a while. Anyway, so, like the way that I felt it in the experience was that intellectually I understood certain things. And maybe intuitively even I understood, but just at an intellectual level, but I didn't feel them.
Right.
And so now I feel them. And so that what that experience was for me was a confirmation of those things that I was thinking were right. But now that I'm really,
and
it was so much about overcoming shadow so that I can gush forth love into the world. And this group, it really does have this mission and purpose of there is an urgency. The world is sick, and we can, through our love of ourselves, help to heal the world. Maybe, but it doesn't. If the world isn't healed, it doesn't really matter, because it's this journey. We are beings of light. We're pure. This is our incarnation here. And I had very strong impressions throughout the night that those faces that I had seen earlier were they were different voices in a chorus that was my inner self, that was my soul, and that there's communication that happens between inner selves, that we don't sense with our brains, but that my inner self had been conspiring with others' inner selves to bring us to where we needed to be, to do the work that we need to do for ourselves, for the people that are around us, and whatever our sphere of influence can expand to. And so it was just and like I said, I had a lot of these insights that I was just writing down, like, okay, how do I then communicate this with people, and how do I remember it? I just wanted to make sure I remembered all of the things that were in there. And I think that the sharing of it, and I was really interested, Michael, when you were talking about the importance of sitting around in a group, and the way that kind of brings up these evolved instincts of sitting around a campfire with community. I felt that, these people that I hadn't ever met before, I just felt so close to, comfortable with, like it was okay to be vulnerable, even though they were strangers. There was just such love and acceptance, and people that I want to be associated with for the rest of my life, and that these are like successful people in the world, that want to help each other and help with this cause. It wasn't like I probably had these preconceived prejudices about like hippie burnout, like people that are just like doing LSD because it's such a trip, man, or something like that. That I'm like, oh no.
So this is a group that you could go back to if you chose. And
yes, yeah, and have that relationship with the shaman, that you talked about, and so. Then the next day there was another, sharing session in the morning, and rather than, well, I spoke, but I got out my guitar and I sang to him, and I said that there have been certain songs that have been prayers to me for many, many years, and one is the George Harrison song, "Give me love, give me life, give me peace on earth, give me hope, help me cope with this heavy," that I had been going off on my own over these 2 or 3 days I was there to sing this in the, in the hills where we were. And now I'm going to sing it to them, and, put aside the insecurities or anything, and just kind of let it go. And it just was really, we just had a really fantastic time. And then I drove home. It was a 6-hour drive to get there. I waited a day. I went and I stayed the night at a friend's house, and then drove home the next day, but just felt like really in tune, really in touch. I still do, so my wife, she can tell a difference. She likes it.
Yes.
And she's a little suspicious about it. Is this going to last? Is this real? But she's going with it. And my kids, my dogs, I'm just more present, more wanting to be present, not sitting in this room working at this computer like I usually spend so much of my time, but just being out and being with them. And and you're right, I am still very fresh out of it. It was so your turn.
Well, I'm very happy for you, and I'm always I think the amount of courage that this takes is amazing. And my most consistent mantra in the middle of a ceremony is, I am never doing this again. Mm-hmm. The amount of courage it takes to go back the second night and to give yourself over for the whole thing even more so.
Yeah.
It's that alone is an unbelievable story.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what a lot of the messages were. Who is it that's shaping who you are? Is it you? Who are you? You know, those kinds of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very Alice in Wonderland. Now I'm thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Those kinds of questions specifically are non-dual. They're traditional non-dual questions.
Mm.
Who are you? Who are you? Going for who are you beyond this manifestation?
Right.
Yeah. That experience of love is if you really pushed me, what's the central, most important element? I would say you hit it.
Yeah.
And it's this wonderful heart opening that Michael, you and I talked about in terms of mystical Eastern Christianity and the Desert Fathers. It's this heart opening love and how to manifest, how to purify that and manifest it in the world.
Does that door typically stay open? Because that would be my concern, is that I experience it. It's so wonderful. And then it's like, where did it go? How do I get it back?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. We would all like to have it. Maybe there are levels of spiritual realization where it does stay open that I don't have a clue about. But I can at least say with ayahuasca, yes, it fades. And then people go back for another ceremony, and it's reinforcing and more cleansing and more opening. And so there's a process. And I could say the same thing about meditating on heart opening exercises and breathing into the heart and, doing heart prayers. That it's a practice. And so, yes, you're very fresh from the ceremony now, and that will abate gradually, biochemically and psychically and in all kinds of ways. And then people say, well, are you becoming addicted because you go to a ceremony once a month or once every 2 months, you're becoming addicted? Well, somehow nobody asks that about Prozac. You have to take Prozac every day. Are you addicted to it? Well, actually, there are some withdrawal systems with some of the very dangerous withdrawal systems with some of the SSRIs that are not present with ayahuasca, of course. So there is a sense of you don't build up a tolerance to it in that way that you need more and more.
Does your
hang on a second, Mike, because I want to respond to your question from what. And again, recognizing that I'm very fresh in it and I haven't gone through the, denouement of the experience. My sense of it wasn't that I was transformed into a different person, but that this is me, and it's like I'm only different in the way of that fear and worry and shadow being removed. And so what I expect over the next 2 weeks is that shadow will gradually start to come back to where it was before.
Might not be quite to where it was before.
Yeah, and that's exactly. But
and also you'll have more objectivity about recognizing it and perhaps catching it.
Yes, yeah. That's exactly what I'm striving towards with that. So I just wanted to say that in response to your question, Michael.
That's really interesting, because what I hear you saying is that you acquire new metacognitive skills.
Yes, I would agree.
That your ability to kind of create an analytical space between your thought and a higher thought about your thought was given to you, or that you somehow attained this capacity, right? That you somehow
interesting.
And it could get stronger and be more sustainable even in difficult emotional situations.
Wow.
I would, from a cognitive point of view, without doing too much of a sleight of hand with words, I would say that is your higher self, your metacognitive self, that aspect of your mind that's a layer up from your typical default cognitive processes. That higher self sounds like part of what was stimulated or part of what was revitalized.
Yeah, my intuitive sense of the brain when I was having the ayahuasca experience was that that's not where the higher self is. It's nowhere in the brain. And in fact, the brain is the shadow. The reason that shadow controls and authors our lives is it's this fight or flight response that really strongly protects us from anything that is frightening, unfamiliar, potentially threatening, and just puts us into that state of closedness. And with the advent of mass media and all of these images that were projected over and over and over again, we're all in such a state of fear that our brains have us really closed off. And that the inner self, I felt, was something that transcended, and I might not be using the right words, but transcended.
That's a great word.
Yeah, transcended the brain. And not that the brain isn't important or vitally important, and not that you can ever even eradicate the shadow from your life, but having that, and maybe this is metacognition, that's a new word concept for me, but having that objective ability to observe when I'm getting into that fight or flight response, when I'm starting to get that norepinephrine, is that how it's pronounced? That's closing me off because I'm starting to get scared. Recognizing that and being able to calm myself. And so I don't know, but I felt that there was much more to who I was and what I was than anything that existed in this body anywhere, and especially in the brain.
This is a really important dialogue between the two of you. I think, Michael, when you talk about metacognition, I think that's really a central part of the healing that happens with ayahuasca particularly, where the person is able to have that extra level of objective awareness and self-reflectiveness. And it's a skill that really does develop and strengthen. I think it's a real cognitive skill that does develop and strengthen over time and can cross different situations and intensities and handle more of what the amygdala dishes out with fight or flight and fear and things like that. And Glenn, I really appreciate your saying the higher self, the spiritual self is a concept that's beyond that. And I think that's really important. And that's where, the Hindu concept of Atman and Brahman, that there's a mystical element to that concept, that it is not just the metacognitive function, but that there's a mystical element to that self with a capital S. And that you're wanting to sort of preserve that spiritual and mystical aspect of it.
Remind me, break down Atma and Brahman again. Brahman is the universal self and Atman is the ego self?
Yeah. No, not the ego self. It's like the one is the ocean and the other is the drop of water inside of us that is part of that ocean.
Okay.
And
is Atman the drop of water?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Right.
But I could have it backwards. It's been so long.
I think that's right. I think I remember that right, yeah.
But certainly it's that concept that this is way beyond our particular brain or personal history, or that it's something bigger.
Is that typical of ayahuasca ceremonies, or like from what I described was peculiar to that?
No, not peculiar at all. I mean, you're describing your own personal healing, which manifests in very different ways with different people.
Yeah.
But that there is personal healing is part of what we're all talking about. And then I think this concept of being able to self-reflect, the metacognitive aspect, is also an important part of the therapeutic aspect that develops. And then this sense of, you didn't quite go this far, but it's this really almost a mystical love. And I don't remember John Lennon's, no, it's Harrison's, it's
Give Me Love, the one that I was saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
George Harrison?
George Harrison.
Yeah.
I don't remember if that came out of the time when he was in India with Maharishi. Did it come out of that? Was it part of that TM experience? Their I think they were on acid the whole time they were in India. Did it come out?
I don't think they were when they. I don't know. Maybe they were when they were.
No, they weren't a lot.
Were they? Yeah.
Yeah, it was all mixed. But did it come out of their mystical time? Give Me Love.
Oh, the song that he's saying. No, it came later. I mean, but I don't know, because he wrote a lot of songs in India that he didn't publish until later. So it may have been.
Because it has that song also has that mystical quality.
Oh, absolutely.
The cosmic love that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And no, that was a big experience for me as well. Yeah. Feeling that.
Yeah. And I think that experience of love is very healing. Yeah. And when Jung talks about the proximity, the approach to the numinous, that quality of love is numinous. Yeah. And that's healing in itself. Yeah. And it's contrasted with, if a boyfriend or a girlfriend is breaking up with a boy and the boy says, well, love me, or vice versa. That's a personal ego love. Yeah. This is much different. And it's about how do we increase this love in the world? It then begins to speak to that. Yeah. 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 So, which George Harrison did pretty well.
He was great. Yeah. Yeah. He did a good job. So I don't know if I'm going to publish any of this or do anything, but I appreciate you sticking around to listen to it and give me feedback.
I love, the poetic phrase, trailing clouds of glory. There is some of that coming out of a ceremony, and I'm also days out of ceremony.
Right. Yeah.
It's something happens. Yeah. It's kind of magical. Yeah.
Well, and on my drive home, I talked with my oldest daughter, who's 21, and we had like the best conversation we probably ever had. Like, as far as me being, here's this experience that I had between ceremonies on the morning of the second day. There were some children that were there. Their parents were participating in the ceremony, and so they were on the grounds. And I went and played with them in a little playground, and I was pushing them on a swing. And I think the oldest was maybe 7, then a 4-year-old. And I said, do you want to do underdog? And they didn't know what underdog, you push and you run under the swing, you go under them. And so you push them up really high, and it scared them to death. And when I used to do that with my kids, when they were that age, I'd be like, oh, well, just hold on tighter, because I'm going to push you really, really high, and you're going to like it. You're going to like it because that's what's fun. And it was like I was enforcing something on them that they weren't comfortable with, and they just had to take it because they were the kid and I was the dad. And so I did that with this little girl, and she was so terrified. I went, oh my gosh, I don't want to scare her. And then, like seeing how the shaman had modeled this behavior of you choose, you tell me, and I will support your choice. I started pushing her on the swing, and I'm like, you tell me when, like very gently, when are we high enough that you're comfortable with? And maybe I would go, how about this? No. Okay. About here. Okay. You tell me. All right. Now tell me when you want me to let go. And I've never been like that before. I've always been like, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to do it. I'm going to surprise you. And you're going to think it's so amazing that you're going to love me for it. and so it was just this really simple thing. That was
it's a wonderful example.
Yeah. Example. And so in the conversation that I had with my daughter, it was more just listening to her and letting her be. And when I would feel the impulse to correct her or to, anything like that, is to just like suppress that and just like really pour the affection that I feel for her back to her, instead of, having this midrash, back and forth discussion. And I did the same thing with my mom, and came home with my wife, and it's just been, a nice afterglow.
Wonderful. Yeah. There was I've been in touch with a man who's about 81, and it took him months to get off all his psychotropic medicines. Months and months. It took him a long time. Been depressed and difficult all his life. I think he's been to 2 ceremonies. So he's like 81 or 82. His wife is 78 or something. Yeah. And her statement is, this is the best thing that's ever happened to our marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. 81. You're like, why couldn't I done this earlier? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even when I start having those kinds of thoughts, like, why did I do this? Like, what are the mistakes that I've made in the past? It's like, you know what? They taught you lessons. Like, be grateful for all those lessons that you learned from those experiences, and that you were able to get to this point where now you feel like freed from them. Like the language of being freed, I thought that I understood, but I didn't know how that felt. And so I kind of feel that way now. Yeah.
I'm
So
very
thank
happy
you.
for you.
So thank you,
Very
Rachel.
happy for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And anything more, Michael?
Well, yeah, Michael, what would you say from a brain research, from a cognitive point of view?
Yeah.
So one of the things that was coming to mind a lot was thinking about an axis in the brain called the hypothalamic pituitary axis, which helps to regulate your bodily setting of stress. And the hypothalamic pituitary axis is mediated, or it's regulated by the hippocampus, which again is an area that is so crucial for memory. And so I would just be very curious to see how all of these pieces of the system are interrelating with one another, that as you're bringing forward memories in the hippocampus, how that is affecting this hypothalamic pituitary axis, and looking for the biological underpinnings. Because here's the thing, even if you do take a full tilt dualistic view that there is this real, invisible, cosmic netherland that you're moving into when you have an experience like that, there still is going to be some connection to your biology. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
it wouldn't have any physical expression at all. So it's like, no matter what type of ultimate cosmic view you have, the biology is still important. Yeah. And so that's where I am, but not in a
Did you feel like I
way.
dismissed the brain, Michael?
No. I'm just saying that like you asked me as a neuroscientist, how am I thinking about this?
Yeah.
That's where my mind naturally gravitates, is thinking through what would be mechanisms that would correlate to this, not from a point of view of trying to reduce it away or undermine the value that you felt in it. But
give me this one.
Okay.
But this is also part of it. Have you looked at Joe Tafour's book, Fellowship of the River?
I haven't. I haven't even heard of it.
Yeah, because he's a medical doctor and he trained with a shaman in Peru. And I think he's talking about, is this the hypothalamic axis or something? I'm going to screw this up, but I think it's the same thing he's talking about as one of the things that mediates the ayahuasca experience with stress-related illness, especially. So he has more of a medical component, that he doesn't have the cognitive neurological, but he has the systemic medical.
No, that's really interesting, because, for example, even putting together, some type of energy practices. So a lot of people will have chakra meditations, and they'll say that there are different energy centers in the body. And so for me, like, I am a certified Reiki master. We can get into like a different conversation.
Oh my goodness.
How I fit that all together with neurophysiology.
Exactly.
But for me, like, my solar plexus is a very active part of my energy body. I can point to my physical body and say, here's where the energy action is happening. Like, that's how specific, localized it is for me. That solar plexus is also very close physically to where the adrenal glands are located. And so again, it doesn't bother me one bit if all of these mental, psychological, spiritual practices ultimately have physical underpinnings to them. They're still valuable. They're still meaningful.
Absolutely.
And the user interface for my body, so to speak, still occurs at that mental level where I'm visualizing the golden light from my solar plexus chakra. I'm not visualizing my adrenal glands secreting hormones. That's not the way that I interface with my body.
Yeah.
You said something, Michael, that I wanted to return to, like, I forget exactly how you worded, but something like a dualistic worldview of you going off to a completely different place. And did you get the sense that that's what I was saying?
No. I wasn't saying that. But I was saying, all that I'm trying to do is leave wide open the interpretive field so that people are empowered to understand their experience on their terms, as opposed to feeling constrained to understanding the experience either in astral or a physiological interpretation only.
Okay. You mean people as in who would be listening to this if I was ever going to publish it? Or just in general?
Sure. Or just in general. That's like one of my themes persistently, as I'm trying to delicately navigate this interface between contemplative traditions and between neurological sciences, is to not, again, have that naive a priori assumption that's unexamined, which is that our materialistic framework is the ultimate or the most effective way for understanding these processes.
Yeah. There are some things that come up that I have heard again and again, so they seem to be themes that people refer to, and one is the sense of being humbled, humility, and equally so to be grateful. People often come out of ceremonies feeling very, very grateful, and this sense of feeling loved and loving, and again having this sense of a relationship with a non-material other. These are themes that come, and also that level of what Michael called the metacognitive aspect, that sense of a witness is what it might be called, a self-observing self, to be able to watch oneself and have some greater objectivity, and then freedom to respond differently, just like you described at the swing set, which seems like a cute, fun little story, but it's a perfect story to describe integration from a ceremony and therapeutic learning, how you change, you can observe yourself and make a different decision and change behavior. I mean, it is a perfect therapeutic example. So, here you have this one experience. You might feel like you're a neophyte, but you've hit many of the right notes, so to speak, literally. Yeah. And for me, I tend to be sort of judgmental and puristic and a purist, and it has to, the ceremony has to be done this sort of way, and it has to be like this. And your ceremony was done differently with recorded music, and yet look at the places you got to, and certainly it's an archetype ayahuasca experience, and I'm very happy for you.
Oh, great, thank you.
And what I've been told about the tobacco in the nose bit, which I've done differently, I've snorted tobacco juice, but it's the same thing, is that it kind of opens up the channels to receive the ayahuasca. It kind of clears things out so that you're more able to receive the medicine, the ayahuasca medicine. And tobacco is considered a master teaching plant as well.
Oh, interesting.
It's very powerful. And I'm sure it's the South American tobacco. He didn't use American cigarettes to get to this.
And I did not purge on the ayahuasca either night, but I did with the rape.
Yeah, and there are no rules.
Yeah.
Can you take like a non-drowsy Dramamine and avoid the nausea beforehand?
I don't think that would be acceptable. And I don't know why I haven't thought of it. Because I'm like nauseous for 6 hours. Yeah, I never asked about that. I think it's part of the purgative bit is part of the whole thing. And, for some people it happens and some people it doesn't. And everybody's different.
Yeah.
I'm nervous even hearing you describe the purgative bit.
Yeah, that's often difficult for people. You had buckets right there. Everyone had a bucket. Yeah, so you were prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was my experience the first night, Michael. I was so I was like holding the bucket and my helper's like, she's like, relax, you'll know when it's time to purge.
Yeah, you will.
You'll have plenty of time to get to the bucket. And I'm like, but this woman I talked to passed out, and it was, and of course that's not going to help me if I pass it, like that anyway. But I can relate to your nerves, Michael, and I would encourage you to challenge them.
I would say I'm nervous and slightly nauseous hours before the ceremony starts. So that's where I come from.
And even my shaman
look forward to it.
and even my shaman said, I have fear. I'm nervous. I have fear every time I do this.
Every time. It's a very powerful medicine.
It's like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to come of it, but he rebuked me in front of the group, kind of like in a very gentle way, but I didn't like it. After the first night, when I was sharing the next morning about this wonderful, very gentle experience that I had, and I had some really neat insights. And he's like, he goes, I don't encourage people for the first time to ask for a gentle experience, because the benefit that you get out of it comes from facing your fears. And grandmother will reward you for that, but you have to give this offering of sincere surrender and sincere request. Otherwise, it's your shadow self that is wants you to stay asleep, does not want you to have this experience, and is really, really good at coming up with justifications as for why you shouldn't do it or why you should do it, and it's these fears. And boy, I really did not like it when he said that in the group.
But is that part of what spurred you on to make that leap for the second night?
It's what spurred me on to yes. Yeah. It did ultimately, for sure. Yeah. But I had another one of these like woo-woo experiences where I went into the studio to get my mat and to put it in the car to leave. And the studio was empty. No one was in there, but there was music playing on a playlist. And the song that was on the playlist, apparently it's a very well-known song, an old song. It's been recorded by dozens of artists, and it was saying, if you stay, you'll have a night like you've never had before and will never have again. And we'll sing with the trees. We'll walk in the flowers. It'll be, this beautiful experience. But if you leave, I'll understand and, give a little love to put in your hand, but this room will be an empty place. And, the experience, it won't be what it could have been. I would have been your shadow's shadow. And this is a love song, like I know now. At the time, right. I was interpreting this as this is grandmother singing to me through the music and telling me it's okay. And the way I interpreted it was, it's okay for me to go. She'll understand. Good. Phew, I can go, and she's not going to be angry at me.
I think the lyrics of that song fall under the category of synchronicity.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And there were so many events like that, even leading up to me being there, and then afterwards, and so yeah, synchronicity. I'm seeing it all around with this, and yeah, magic.
Well, welcome.
Yeah, I know. Thank you. Do you have any more questions, Michael?
You're just so lovely, Rachel. I just want to you're talking with you.
Yeah.
This has been great fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And maybe we'll bump into each other again someday.
Anytime. Yeah. Good luck with your work.
Thank you so much. Namaste.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.